Hi, and welcome back to Becca Babbles podcast. I'm your host, Becca. I'm a certified personal trainer, holistic health coach, and future chiropractor on my way to figuring out this thing we called life. Now, let's get babbling. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Becca Babbles podcast. This episode, we're diving into all things women's health. If you have a menstrual cycle or know someone who has a menstrual cycle, or you just want to learn more about the menstrual cycle, this is the episode for you. I'm so pumped for this episode. I haven't made like a female menstrual cycle episode in a long time, so this one's going to be really fun. I know there's been a lot of research coming out now, or maybe it just might be in my own bubble, about women's health and the popularity of it, which I think is amazing. The only thing is like now in the day and age with like social media and stuff like that, there can become trends that you feel like you have to stick to be the healthiest person that you can be, or to optimize your menstrual cycle and stuff like that. And one of the big ones recently was, should I train based off my cycle? And if you haven't heard of this before, basically it takes the idea that in your, like, after you bleed, typically based off your hormones, you should have like, feel like you're more energized, feel like you can hit a good workout, like you can slam those weights and hit a PR. And then as you get to like ovulation and past ovulation, then it's like, okay, maybe we start to like calm things down. We start doing some like yin yoga or more stretching and stuff like that. And if you know anything about me, I love lifting weights. I love going hard at the gym. I loved hitting PRs all the time. Well, I say all the time. I just love when I get to hit a PR. And training based off my cycle never really sat well with me. And it also, again, is this general guideline of what you should or shouldn't be doing with your body. And I always want to advise you, like, even when you're listening to any of my podcasts, like, if it sounds like I'm saying you have to do this, you don't have to. Just because your favorite influencer told you this is the best way that I feel my best, or this trend that I decided to do for this period of time, and maybe the little thing they're selling you at the very end of it, you don't have to do it. Allowing yourself to question your own cues that you have from your body is going to be more important than you just like following someone's blatant advice. Now, I will say sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out what you should do with your body if you don't feel like you're feeling the, or hearing those cues right. And that's why working with someone is really important, or just like being reflective with yourself and maybe tracking some data or just journaling on how you're feeling at the end of the day is really important. But I know some of you guys are athletes and you have events coming up, or maybe you're someone who's like, I don't feel like I want to do yin yoga when I am in my luteal phase or when I am bleeding. And you don't have to. A normal cycle can last between like 21 to 25 days. And I want to actually give you the tools to understand how your menstrual cycle actually works and what it looks like, and maybe like how to fuel your body to actually make those phases of your cycle easier. Instead of saying, I can't do this and I can't do that, instead, I'm going to give you the tools to like actually be able to understand how you can perform at your best during whatever phase that you're in. Now, everyone's going to be individual in like how certain things work. So again, I'm always going to say, you need to test this with your own body and get curious. I can give you the foundations for things, and like you can start messing around with your body and seeing like, okay, does this work for me or does this not? But what I'm gathering from is the research that I've collected from studies that people have done with a group of people, and you're not always that group of person. So N equals 1. If you don't know what that means, that literally means population equals 1, and that is you. So with that being said, if you do not know what a normal menstrual cycle looks like, that's totally fine. Like I said, a normal cycle can last between 21 to 45 days. So even if you're not that perfect, like 28-day cycle, I promise you, you're fine. My perfectionist out there, I love you so much. You do not have to hit that 28 days for you to get your menstrual bleed and be okay. I promise you, you're still healthy and I love you. You can either think of it as like the follicular phase and then the luteal phase and split it up into only 2 phases, or you can split it up into 4. You may hear this based off of whatever book you're reading or whoever anyone's talking to you, but the 4 phases would be your menstrual phase. So this is like your bleeding phase. This is when you're actually bleeding. And then that follicular phase would be once the bleeding stops till all the way till ovulation. Ovulation is technically 1 day. They typically mark it as day 14. And in that phase, I guess I should probably go through like what the different hormones are happening in each phase. Well, I'll just give you that last phase. So again, we've got the menstrual phase, the bleeding phase, follicular phase is the menstrual phase. After the menstrual phase, you're done bleeding all the way up till ovulation. Then you've got ovulation. And then after ovulation, you've got your luteal phase. And a lot of the times, this is when people tend to say they have like PMS symptoms during that phase, leading up till their menstrual bleed. So in these different phases, you've got a bunch of different hormones going on. So on your first day of your first menstrual cycle, so like you're bleeding, all of your hormones are at its lowest. So you've got estrogen, you got progesterone, you got follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. All of these are different. There's other hormones at play, but these are the typical ones that people talk about when they're dealing with the menstrual cycle. So with luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, these are going to, as you are done bleeding, they're going to slowly start to rise. And then they're going to peak right at that day 14 or ovulation point. Your luteinizing hormone is going to like skyrocket. And then your follicle stimulating hormone is going to have like a little bump, but not as big as luteinizing hormone. At the same time, progesterone and estrogen, well, actually, estrogen is going to like be rising. And then progesterone is going to rise a little bit, but like not a ton. And then right before ovulation, your estrogen is going to spike and then come straight back down. After ovulation, your luteinizing hormone and your follicle stimulating hormones kind of going to just like, they're going to bump and then they're going to just kind of be chilling. Your estrogen is going to slowly rise and kind of do this like hilly formation. If I can get the picture of this chart that I have for you guys, I'll make sure to like put it right here. But it's going to slowly rise almost like a tiny little hill and then come back down. While progesterone, it's been slowly rising this entire time. It's really going to start rising in this luteal phase. And it's going to curve at the top and have become a bigger hill than what estrogen was. And then it's going to slowly taper down again. That's what a total normal menstrual cycle would look like. Now, based off this, I want to give you some ideas of how to fuel your body based off the phase of your cycle. And this is just going to be optimized by like how your body uses fuel. So women, when they're in their follicular phase, they tend to have decrease in fat oxidation, decrease in protein oxidation, increase in carbohydrate oxidation, and decrease glycogen storage. Now, if you're not a science nerd like me, you're like, oxidation, what? I promise I'll break it down. Basically, all that means is like your body's way of utilizing resources is either decreased or increased. So, for instance, in the follicular phase, carbohydrates, so your fruits, your veggies, your sweet potatoes, your oats, things like that, your body's going to use up more of those. But it's also going to use up more of your glycogen stores. So this is why when people may say like, oh, I feel amazing in my follicular phase, it may be because you're utilizing the prime resource that your body wants to use in high intensity exercises. So the body loves to use carbohydrates for high intensity exercises, whether that's endurance, whether that's like HIIT cardio, whether that's like you're busting it out at the gym lifting heavy weights. It loves to use carbohydrates. And your body's actually using those carbohydrates a lot easier in your follicular phase. Now, protein and fat oxidation is decreased in comparison to that carbohydrate oxidation. And the reason why your glycogen stores are decreased is because your body's actually using up those glycogen stores because it's using those carbohydrates. And so glycogen is the stored form of glucose, which is a carbohydrate being broken down. And then glycogen is being stored in either your muscles or your liver. So those stores are going to be used up. That's why you may hear people say like, oh, you should eat more carbohydrates in your follicular phase. This is why, because your body's actually utilizing those carbohydrates more and why you might actually have more energy. Now, based off like current recommendations on how much carbohydrates you should be eating, and this could vary from person to person, but for the most part, carbohydrates, we want them to be about like 45 to 65% of your total calorie intake. And if you're anything like me, I'm like, I need more numbers than just percentages. So for active population, and I'm doing more research on this, but they recommend to have 6 to 10 grams per kilogram a day of carbohydrates for maximized performance. And when I say I'm doing more research on this, there is, I forget the name of it. I'll make sure to put it in the description below and the book that I'm reading with this, but they emphasize just the importance of eating carbohydrates. I know I'm definitely not a no carb person. I think carbohydrates are important, but I would be lying to you if there's still some times where like that deep-seated belief that I had growing up where like carbs are bad is still inside of me. And so hearing things where it's like, okay, we're eating like a higher carbohydrate intake, I'm like, this is sus. I don't know about this. So I will definitely keep you up to date on what more I find about carbohydrates, and maybe I need to do more research on that. But again, this is talking about to maximize performance, and performance versus longevity versus like whatever else you may be looking for may be different, or like body composition. Those all may be different. But for this, if you are trying to maximize performance, you should be at 6 to 10 grams per kilogram per day if you're trying to maximize performance. That's your follicular phase. Now, your luteal phase is a little bit different. Your luteal phase, you're going to increase in fat oxidation. You're going to increase in protein oxidation, decrease in carbohydrate oxidation. Your resting metabolic rate's going to increase, and your glycogen stores are going to increase. So again, what does that all mean? Basically, this just means that your body is going to use fats and protein more as fuel in comparison to carbohydrates. So that's why your glycogen stores are going to increase because you're not using those carbohydrates as much. But it is going to use more of the fats that are stored in your body and the fats that you consume. This also means you're going to be using the proteins that you consume and are stored at rest. Now, when I was digging into this research, I was like, this is interesting, because later on in one of the articles that I read, it talks about the importance of carb loading for endurance athletes when it comes to being in their luteal phase. And I was like, I don't understand, if we're utilizing fats more and proteins more, why wouldn't we then just increase the fats that we're eating? And you would be right in saying that, yes, you are using more fats, so it would make sense to increase the fat intake. But again, it still stands still that for endurance sports, carbohydrates are the primary resource for those events. So for endurance athletes, you're definitely going to need to do a carb load before your event. Minimum 3 days leading up to it, you need to do a carb load of consuming 8 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. That way, you'll actually have the carbohydrate sources that you need, and your body can utilize those, even though you're in that luteal phase where at rest you are utilizing more fats than proteins. With that being said, you are going to have an increase in energy expenditure. So it was completely normal that you need to eat more during this phase. This is where listening to your body and not just being based off your macros that you have calculated in your phone. It's okay to be like, oh my goodness, I'm starving. I need to eat more. Listen to that. Now, I also had mentioned that protein oxidation or just protein breakdown is increased during this phase. And with that, that means that not just the food that you're eating is being broken down more, but also the proteins that you have inside your body. And protein is needed for recovery, it's needed to build muscle, and all of those things are needed for performance. So during this phase, you might actually want to boost up your protein intake to counteract for the protein oxidation that you are dealing with in this phase. So it's suggested that most women increase to at least 1.6 grams per kilogram per day or to 2 grams per kilogram per day. So for me, what I'm thinking about doing is, for myself, being around that like 1.6 grams throughout like my whole cycle, and then leaning up more towards that 2 grams per kilogram. But if you feel like you don't feel as great eating that much protein, you can lower it and shift it. But I would say when you're in that luteal phase, definitely make sure you're at that 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram per day, just so that you are at least maintaining the protein synthesis and not just breaking down the muscle that you have built, because we all know building muscle is a struggle here. And we at least want to maintain what we have and not regress from that, because you're putting in all that effort. But what the really cool thing is I know a lot of people get concerned with when they are exercising, if the exercises that they're doing, like if that's bad for them to do in their cycle, kind of like what I had mentioned before, where you have to like lift the heavy weights and then do yin yoga at the end. And what's really interesting is that strength and power is not affected very much in your menstrual cycle, which is really cool, because that basically then tells you you can do that throughout your entire cycle. You just need to adjust the intensity. Now, I will say it's, yes, strength and power is not affected by things like nutrient intake and like the way that you need to fuel your body and stuff like that. I would still say that you need to like eat higher protein, and for performance, like probably increase those carbohydrates, but you don't have to get as particular, like making sure that you carb load or something like that, like an endurance athlete would. But other things can come into play that can affect your strength and power when you are lifting weights, or if you're trying to hit a PR, or you're trying to build muscle. So when progesterone rises, that increases our basal metabolic rate, but it also increases our temperature. So our thermoregulation, which is basically our ability to regulate temperature, is gonna kind of be on the hotter end. We're gonna be more on the hotter end, and you might not be wanting to wear your like sweatshirt as much, or maybe your sleep is inhibited because you're like, man, a couple of days ago I was fine sleeping, but now I'm so hot I like feel like I have to like shred all the sheets off. That's completely normal. That's what progesterone is going to do. So that then may hinder you in your sports, or the weight room that you're trying to lift the weights in. Like, you might have to take a few more breaks just because you're like getting hotter all the time. That's completely normal and something to be expected. So making sure that you're drinking enough water and getting in enough electrolytes in before and after your workout is going to be really important so that you can kind of like regulate your system. I know sometimes like I go to the gym and it's like, why are the fans not on? um and maybe you can be one of those people that like actually walk up to the front desk and be like, hey, can you turn on the fans? Or you can be that person who, I know some people like bring around their own little fan. I probably won't. I'm probably just going to sit there in my misery and like let myself sweat it out, which is fine because then like that's a great way for your body to naturally detox anyways. Some other things that can be affected during your menstrual cycle is your recovery. So they actually did a recent study with 8 trained female athletes, and they found that their muscle damage and inflammation following a 90-minute running workout that was about at their like 70% VO2 max during their luteal phase, they were able to recover from a lot faster compared to their mid-luteal phase. So this can be a factor in with some of your strength training or just training for your sports in general that you may need to take into account of, instead of just being worried like, oh no, my recovery is going to suck in my luteal phase, maybe just keep that in mind and just be like, okay, maybe I need to like really focus on my recovery during my luteal phase. And that doesn't mean doing yin yoga. That means like making sure you're eating enough, making sure you're hitting your protein intake, making sure you get like 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night, making sure you turn off your phone an hour before bed. These are all things that are going to help your recovery. And if you're not feeling good, then like bring down the intensity of your workout. You don't have to go balls to the wall all the time, even though it might feel good to do that. And I'm preaching to the choir here because I'm pretty sure I just did it today at the gym. So with all this being said, like this is all really cool information, and it's cool to see like how your body may be affected, and maybe you can like go try out like, maybe I should like do more carbohydrates during my follicular phase and do more fats during my luteal phase and stuff like that, and playing around with that, or like increasing your protein during your luteal phase and then like keeping your protein about moderate in your follicular phase. These are all like fun things to test out. But the most important thing is making sure you're eating enough. Because if you're not eating enough, you're not going to recover well. You're not going to have the energy, and your body's just going to be utilizing sources for you to just live as a human being rather than being able to build muscle or perform at your sport. So your optimal amount of like energy availability, which basically means like what you need left over after you exercise, to do like to help with your immune system, to help with creating hormones and just being a regular person, is about 40 to 45 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass a day. Now, I want you to pull out your phone and actually do the calculations, because for most of you, I know I did this for myself, is a lot more than what you think. And you need this for your bone health. You need this for your metabolism. And then you need this for your performance. If you want to perform and be like the Wonder Woman that you are, you need to fuel your body enough to actually get there, but at least you need the essentials there. So forget everything else that I just said at the beginning of this podcast. If you are not eating enough, all of that is not going to like do anything. So making sure first you're eating enough, and then you can start messing around with all of these other fun things and test out how your body may feel on increased fats during your luteal phase, or increased carbohydrates during your follicular phase, and mess around with that. So I hope this podcast helped in making you realize that you don't have to change the way that you exercise just because of some Instagram post that someone put that said you needed to do yin yoga during your luteal phase. Athletes are going to have to go out there and perform at their sport. We can't just like change their training date because you say like, oh, sorry, I'm in my luteal phase. Like, that's not going to work, and we can't be passive here. We can understand how our cycles work, and it's really cool to learn about how the menstrual cycle works and being our own little biohackers here. But I want it to be encouraging to where you feel like you can actually go out and do things rather than things you can't do. So yes, listening to your body is important, and maybe lowering that intensity is important. But a lot of other things are like coming into play rather than your 28-day cycle. You also have like how you sleep, how you ate, how other stressors in your life that are going to come into play that are going to impact your life. But tracking your cycle and journaling about like how certain things affect you just gives you a better understanding about how your own body works. So I hope this episode empowered you to take control of how you feel and how you want to perform as a human being, whether that is someone who just like goes to the gym to be healthy, or someone who is trying to optimize longevity, or someone who is actually an athlete. So let me know, reach out to me if you are an athlete currently and are actually competing, or if you're just someone who goes to the gym and is just trying to gain muscle. I'd love to hear how you're going to apply this information that I just taught you guys. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at Becca Ann Wellness on Instagram or at beccababbles podcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and review. It really helps the podcast to be reached out to other people so they can get all this fun information. And with all that being said, I can't wait to babble with you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Becca Babbles Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, the best thing that you can do is leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other listening platform of your choosing. If you want to learn more about me, you can do that by following me on Instagram at Becca Ann Wellness, or by checking out my blog, freebies, offers, and newsletter on my website at beccaannwellness.com. If you want to share the love of the podcast, you can do that by taking a screenshot and sharing it on social media and tagging me and the podcast at Becca Ann Wellness and using the hashtag Becca Babbles Podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to babble with you next time.